I heard every prayer you thought I ignored, every single one. The ones you prayed with confidence in the early days when faith felt easy and the future felt bright. The ones you prayed through gritted teeth when the confidence had worn down and all that was left was a stubborn refusal to stop. The ones you prayed in the car, alone, when no one else could hear you, when the words came out broken and half-formed because the grief was too large to organize into proper sentences. The ones you prayed at 3 in the morning when the silence was loudest and the doubt was closest, and you were not entirely sure anyone was listening, but you prayed anyway because you did not know what else to do. I heard all of them. Not one of them was lost. Not one of them dissolved into nothing before it reached me. Every prayer you have ever prayed in honesty and in need arrived at my throne fully and completely, and every single one of them received my full attention. I need you to hear that today because I know the silence has made you wonder, and the wondering has cost you something, and it is time to set that particular weight down. My dear child, I want to address something that has been living quietly in the back of your heart for a long time now, something you may not have voiced out loud, but that I know has been present, shaping the way you pray and the way you approach me and the level of expectation you allow yourself to carry into our conversations. There is a part of you that has started to feel like certain prayers simply do not work for you. Not for other people. You have seen the answered prayers. You have heard the testimonies. You do not doubt that I move. But for you, specifically, there is a category of prayer that you have quietly stopped expecting to be answered, because the pattern of asking and not receiving has become long enough and consistent enough that you have begun to adjust your expectations downward rather than continue to be surprised by the silence. I see that adjustment. I understand why you made it. And I want to tell you today that the pattern you thought you were seeing was not the pattern that was actually there. What looked like consistent non-response was not that. What looked like a God who was answering everyone else but somehow not getting to your particular requests was not that either. What was actually happening was something far more intentional and far more loving than indifference. And I need to explain it to you because you deserve the explanation, and you have been carrying the wrong interpretation for too long. There is a difference between a prayer that has not been answered and a prayer that has not been answered yet. There is a difference between silence and refusal. There is a difference between a delay that feels like rejection and a delay that is actually the most loving possible response to what you asked for. I know those distinctions are hard to feel from inside the waiting. I know that from your perspective, the outcome looks the same regardless of which category the silence falls into. But the category matters enormously for what you believe about me and about yourself, and about whether the praying is worth continuing. And I want to give you the correct category for every prayer you have prayed that has not yet received a visible answer. Not ignored, not refused, not forgotten, not deprioritized. Held by me, carefully and intentionally, in a timing that serves your good more than the immediate answer would have. Every unanswered prayer in your life falls into that category, and I want to walk you through what that has actually looked like. I want to talk to you about the prayers that did not receive the answer you asked for and whether that means they were not heard, because I know this is where it gets complicated. I know that some of what you have prayed for has not only been delayed, but has genuinely not arrived in the form you asked for. Relationships that did not heal, doors that did not open, outcomes that went the other direction from the one you were trusting me for. And I know that in those situations, the explanation that it is simply a matter of timing does not fully satisfy, because the timing has now moved past the point where the original answer was still possible. I want to speak to those prayers directly, and I want to do so with honesty rather than with easy reassurance. Yes, I heard those prayers. Yes, they reached me. Yes, they received my full attention. And yes, the outcome was different from what you asked for, not because I was absent, not because I did not care, but because I was working with a view of your life and of the lives connected to yours that you did not have access to, and the outcome that seemed like the right answer from your perspective was not the one that served the full picture of what I was doing. That is not a comfortable answer. I know that. It requires a level of trust in my judgment that is genuinely difficult when the thing you lost was something that mattered deeply to you. But I need you to know that even in those outcomes, I was present. I was not indifferent to the cost, and what I was doing in the aftermath of the answer you did not receive is still unfolding in ways that you have not yet been able to fully see. I also want to speak to the prayers that felt too small to bother me with, the ones you barely voiced because they seemed too ordinary, too personal, too minor in the grand scheme of things to warrant bringing to the God of the universe. The practical ones, the everyday ones, the ones about the small fears and the small needs and the small moments of difficulty that felt insignificant compared to the larger prayers you were also carrying. I want you to know something about those prayers. Nothing you bring to me is too small. Nothing about your life is beneath my attention. The God who counts the hairs on your head is not a God who draws a line at a certain level of significance before he starts paying attention. I am interested in all of it, the large prayers and the small ones, the crises and the inconveniences, the things that shake your world and the things that simply make your Tuesday harder than it needed to be. Every single one of them matters to me because you matter to me, and everything that matters to you, by extension, matters to me too. Stop editing your prayers for importance. Stop deciding in advance that something is not worth bringing. Bring all of it. I want all of it. Every ordinary, every small, every seemingly insignificant piece of your life is something I am interested in and something I want to be involved in. You do not have to manage the small things alone while only bringing me the large ones. I am available for all of it, all the time, without limit, and without any sense that you are asking too much. I want to speak now to the prayers you prayed for other people, the ones you have carried for people you love, some of whom have wandered, some of whom are struggling, some of whom are in situations that break your heart, and that you have brought to me over and over and over again without seeing the change you were believing for. The parent praying for a child, the child praying for a parent, the friend praying for someone who seems to be moving further from everything that would help them, not closer. I want you to hear me say something clearly about those prayers. They are not wasted. The love that drives them is not misplaced. The faith that keeps bringing the same name back to me again and again is not foolish or ineffective. I see every prayer you have prayed over another person's life. I see the tears behind them. I see the love that refuses to give up even when the giving up would be easier. And I want you to know that those prayers are doing something. They are creating an atmosphere around the person you are praying for. They are holding open a door in the spirit that the enemy wants closed. They are contributing to a work I am doing in that person's life that you cannot see from the outside. A quiet, patient, persistent work that your persistent, patient, quiet prayers are directly supporting. Do not stop. The breakthrough in that person's life that you have been praying for is not a foregone conclusion in either direction. Your prayers are part of what tips the balance. Keep praying. Keep bringing the name. Keep believing for the person, even when the person cannot yet believe for themselves. Let me speak to you now about the specific prayer that you have been carrying the longest, the one that has been in your heart since before you can clearly remember when it started. The one that is so familiar it has almost become part of the furniture of your inner life, always present, always carried, always hoped for, but never quite arriving. I know what it is. I have known what it is every day that you have carried it. And I want you to hear me speak directly about it today, not in generalities, but in the most personal terms I can use without removing the element of trust that this requires of you. That prayer has been heard every single time you prayed it. Every version of it. The hopeful versions from the early days and the exhausted versions from the harder seasons and the barely a whisper versions from the moments when you could not find the energy to pray it properly but prayed it anyway. All of them reached me. All of them were received. And the answer to that prayer is not absent. It is in process. It is being prepared with a level of care that is proportional to how long and how faithfully it has been carried. I am not going to give you a timeline because the timeline is not mine to give in this form. But I am going to give you this. The prayer was never ignored. The prayer was never set aside. The prayer has been alive in my hands every day you have been carrying it. And when the answer arrives, it will arrive in a form that makes it unmistakably clear that it was worth the wait. Hold on to it one more day, and then one more after that. I want to go deeper now into something that I think is at the root of why the silence has been so painful, because I do not think the pain has really been about the unanswered prayers themselves, as real as that pain is. I think the deeper pain has been about what the unanswered prayers seem to say about the relationship. Because when someone you love does not respond to what you bring them, the practical loss of the thing you asked for is only part of what hurts. The larger part is the question it raises about whether the love you thought was there is actually there. Whether the connection you believed in is actually as strong as you believed. Whether the relationship is real, or whether you have been bringing your heart to someone who is not as present, not as attentive, not as personally invested in you as you thought. That is the wound underneath the wound. And that is what I most want to address today. The relationship is real. It is more real than anything else in your life. The love is present. It has never not been present. The attention has never wavered. And the fact that certain prayers did not receive immediate visible answers was never, not once, a reflection of anything having diminished on my end. The connection between us has never been weakened by the silence. The silence has never been a signal from me about the state of our relationship. It has been a feature of the timing, of the process, of the larger work I was doing, never of the love. And I need that to land, because as long as you interpret the unanswered prayer as a message about how much I care, you will keep pulling back from the relationship in self-protection. And I do not want that for you. I want you to come to me with full confidence, with open hands, with the same boldness you would bring to someone you were completely certain loved you and was completely invested in your good. Because that is exactly who I am to you, completely certain, completely invested, and completely present every time you bring your voice to me. I also want to speak to the way the enemy has used the unanswered prayers against you, because he has been strategic about this particular vulnerability, and I think you need to see the strategy clearly. Every time a prayer did not receive a visible answer, the enemy was there to offer an interpretation, and his interpretation was always the same, dressed in different words, but carrying the same message. God does not hear you. God does not respond to you the way he responds to others. You are outside the circle of the ones whose prayers get answered. There is something about you specifically, something wrong or missing or insufficient, that explains the silence. He has been building a case with the unanswered prayers. A case designed not to inform you about reality, but to isolate you from me, to make the praying feel pointless, to create enough discouragement that you stop coming, because he knows that as long as you are coming to me, as long as you are maintaining the connection, even through the silence, he cannot fully have the influence over your life that he is trying to gain. The unanswered prayers were never evidence of my absence. They were the battlefield where the enemy was trying to convince you of my absence. And I am telling you today, clearly and directly, that every case he built was built on a lie. Let me tell you something about what has been happening in the invisible realm in response to the prayers you thought were going nowhere. There is more happening in response to your prayers than you can currently perceive. The prayers you have prayed have been setting things in motion that have no visible sign yet, but that are real and that are building toward moments of fulfillment that will make the whole sequence suddenly legible. Prayer is not a passive activity that sits in a waiting room until I decide to act on it. Prayer is active. Prayer moves things. Prayer opens doors in the spiritual realm that nothing else can open. Prayer creates conditions in the invisible that eventually produce changes in the visible. When you prayed for the person who has not yet changed, your prayer was not wasted while the change was not happening. It was working in ways you could not see, loosening things, creating openings, building pressure against barriers that the enemy had constructed, contributing to a breaking point that is coming even if it has not yet arrived. When you prayed for the door that has not yet opened, your prayer was not sitting idle. It was active in the invisible, preparing the conditions, positioning the people, building toward the moment when what you prayed for becomes what you see. Nothing you have ever prayed was inactive. Everything was working. The evidence is coming. Keep going. I want to talk to you about the quality of your prayers versus the persistence of them, because I think there has been a subtle but damaging belief in you that the lack of answer is related to something about the way you pray. That if you prayed with more faith, or prayed longer, or prayed with better words, or prayed with a cleaner heart, the answers would flow more freely. And I want to address that belief carefully, because there is a kernel of something true in it that the enemy has twisted into something damaging. It is true that faith matters in prayer. It is true that the condition of the heart matters. It is true that persistent prayer has a particular power. But what is not true is that your prayers have been insufficient. What is not true is that the silence has been caused by a deficiency in how you have been praying. You have been praying with everything you had in every season, and everything you had was always enough. The standard is not perfection. It never was. The standard is honesty and persistence, and the willingness to keep coming back. And by that standard, you have been more than faithful. You have been bringing imperfect but sincere prayers to a God who receives sincerity with more joy than he receives polished performance. And every single one of those sincere, imperfect, tired, hopeful, desperate, faithful prayers has been exactly what I was listening for. Please know that every seed you plant in this mission grows into a torch that shines in someone else's darkness. Whether by buying a coffee, making a donation, or becoming a member of our community, your support does not go to a channel. Your actions are supporting a divine mission to save lost souls. But more than your support, we want your presence. When you head to our Daily Light of Christ community through the link in the description or the pinned comment, you are not just visiting a site. You are entering a family of like-minded believers who know what it means to pray prayers that have not yet been answered and to keep praying anyway, who gather every day to lift each other up and remind each other that the silence is not the final word and the waiting is not the end of the story. This is a sanctuary where you can post your prayer requests, lift the burdens of others, and engage in daily discussions with people who speak the language of faith and who will stand with you in prayer when you do not have the strength to stand alone. Whether you are joining one of our membership tiers for deeper study, sowing a seed of faith, or simply joining our daily morning prayers, you are helping build a global altar of worship. Heaven moves through willing voices, but it grows through a community that stands together. Each gift you give reaches someone who is sitting right now with a prayer they have almost stopped praying, needing to hear that it was heard, needing to hear that it matters, needing to hear that the silence was never rejection. Your seed reaches them, your presence changes things. Given it will be given to you, that is the promise that sustains this shared mission. Come with purpose. Join the conversation. Plant your seed in fertile ground. Let us open the heavens together. I want to speak now about what happens when you pray. Not the theology of it, not the mechanics, but the reality of it from my perspective. Because I think if you understood what actually happens when you bring your voice to me, it would change the way you pray forever. When you pray, you are not sending a message into a void and hoping it finds its destination. You are not dropping a request into a system and waiting for it to be processed. You are speaking directly to someone who is already listening, who is already leaning toward you, who receives every word the moment it is formed, and who is immediately and personally engaged with what you have brought. There is no delay between the speaking and the receiving on my end. There is no queue. There is no waiting room. The moment your heart turns toward me in prayer, I am there, fully present, fully attentive, not managing 1,000 other things and giving you a fraction of my focus, but completely present to you in that moment, as though you were the only one in all of creation speaking to me right now. I know that is difficult to comprehend. I know it strains the edges of what feels possible, but it is the truth about how I work, and it is the truth about what happens every single time you pray. You have never prayed to an inattentive God. You have never prayed to a distracted God. You have never prayed to a God who was too busy or too far away or too occupied with something more important to receive what you were bringing. Every prayer was received by someone who was already there, already listening, and already more invested in the answer than you were. I also want to speak to the shame that some of you carry around your prayer life. The feeling that you do not pray enough, or correctly enough, or with sufficient faith, or in the right way. The sense that the silence is somehow connected to your performance as a person who prays, that if you were more consistent, or more disciplined, or more articulate, or more faithful, the answers would come more readily. I want to dismantle that connection directly and completely. The answers to your prayers are not a function of how well you pray. They are a function of my love for you and my wisdom about your life, and my timing for what I am doing in your story. A perfectly articulate prayer, prayed by someone who has it all together, does not receive more of my attention than a broken, barely coherent prayer prayed by someone who is falling apart. I do not grade prayers. I receive them, all of them, with equal attention and equal love and equal investment in what is being asked. Your prayer life does not need to be better before I start answering. Your prayers do not need to be cleaner or longer or more theologically correct. They need to be honest. That is the only qualification. Bring me the honest thing, whatever form it takes, and I will receive it with everything I have. I want to speak now about answered prayers, because I think in the weight of the unanswered ones, it is easy to lose sight of the ones that were answered, and that loss of sight matters more than it seems. Think back over your life, not just the recent season, but the full span of it. Think about the moments when something arrived that you had prayed for, that you had needed, that showed up in a way that carried the unmistakable signature of something more than coincidence. The provision that came at exactly the right moment. The connection that happened in a way that made no natural sense, but that changed the trajectory of something important. The time you were protected from something you did not even know was coming, and only realized later what had been kept from you. The inner shift that happened in a season of prayer that was as real and as significant as any external answer could have been. Those moments are part of your history with me. They are not isolated incidents that happened and then were replaced by a God who stopped showing up. They are evidence of a consistent character, of a God who responds, who provides, who protects, who moves. The evidence of my faithfulness in your past is the most reliable indicator of my faithfulness in your present and your future. Let the answered prayers speak as loudly as the unanswered ones. Let them be the lens through which you interpret the silence, rather than letting the silence be the lens through which you interpret the answers. I also want to speak to the prayers that were answered in ways you did not recognize at the time. The answers that came in a different form from the one you were expecting, so different that you almost missed them entirely. The prayer for safety that was answered not by the dramatic intervention you might have imagined, but by a quiet redirecting that kept you from a road you never knew was dangerous. The prayer for provision that was answered not with the specific thing you asked for, but with something different that turned out to serve you better in ways that only became clear over time. The prayer for a relationship that was answered not with the restoration you hoped for, but with the grace to let go of something that was never going to give you what you needed from it. These answers do not always look like answers when they arrive. They often look like unanswered prayers. But with time, and with the willingness to look back and see the shape of what happened, they reveal themselves as something carefully crafted, as responses to what you needed rather than just to what you asked for. I'm always responding to the deeper prayer underneath the surface one, to what your heart is actually reaching for, even when the words you prayed were reaching for something more specific. And that deeper response is always in your best interest, even when it is hardest to receive. I want to say something to you about the prayers you have given up on, the ones that moved out of the active category and into the somewhere between resigned and archived space of things you used to pray for but stopped. Not because you decided the answer was no, but because the praying became too heavy to continue and the hoping became too costly to maintain. Those prayers are not beyond recovery. The fact that you stopped praying them does not mean the answer is no longer available. It does not mean the door has closed because the knocking stopped. I'm not a God who withdraws what I was willing to give because the asking paused. I am a God who receives the return of a prayer with the same openness I had when it was first brought to me. If there is something you prayed for and let go of, something you set down in a season of exhaustion and have not picked back up, I want you to consider picking it back up today. Not with the energy of someone starting fresh, but with the quiet, honest, I am tired but I am still here energy of someone who is willing to bring it one more time and trust me with it one more day. That is enough. That has always been enough. And I will receive it as though it is the first time it was ever brought to me, with the same freshness and the same investment and the same love. There is one more thing I want to say about prayer before we move toward the close, And it is something I think will change the way you approach it going forward if you let it land fully. Prayer is not primarily a mechanism for getting things from me. It is primarily a way of being with me. It is the form that closeness takes in this season of your life, the vehicle through which the relationship between us is maintained and deepened and made more real. When you pray, even when the specific request is not answered in the way you hoped, something is always happening in the relationship itself. Something is deepening. Something is being built between us that is more valuable than any individual answer could be. The intimacy that develops through the honest, persistent, sometimes anguished, sometimes joyful practice of bringing your life to me in prayer is the greatest treasure that prayer produces. And that treasure is never wasted. It is never lost. It accrues in every season, regardless of the visible outcome of any particular request. The relationship we are building through your prayer life, through every conversation we have had, even the ones that felt one-sided, is the most permanent and most significant thing that prayer has produced in your life. And it is something that no circumstance and no silence and no enemy can take away. I want to take one more moment and speak to the prayers you were too afraid to pray. The ones that lived in your heart but never made it to your lips because they felt too bold, too presumptuous, too much like asking for something that was above your station. The prayers you censored before they could be offered because you were not sure I would be willing, or because you were afraid of how it would feel if you brought them fully and they were not answered. The dreams you held back from prayer because praying them out loud would make them real, and real things can be lost in ways that private things cannot. I want to speak to those unprayed prayers today, the ones that never made it out of your heart and into the conversation between us. I received them anyway. The ones you held back, the ones you were afraid to pray, the ones too tender or too large or too vulnerable to voice, I saw them in you. I have always seen everything in you, including the prayers that never reached your lips, and I want to tell you something about them. They are not too bold. They are not presumptuous. They are not above what I am willing to engage with. Nothing you could bring to me in honest need is beyond the reach of what I am able and willing to do. Nothing you desire for your life, if it is rooted in genuine longing rather than in the enemy's counterfeits, is something I want you to feel ashamed of bringing to me. Stop holding the prayers back. Stop deciding in advance what I am willing to hear. Bring all of it. The bold ones and the tender ones, and the ones that feel too large and the ones that feel too small. Bring everything. I want everything, and I can handle everything. Every last prayer you have been holding back, bring it today. I am listening. I have always been listening, and I am not going anywhere. I want to say one final thing before we pray, and I want to say it to the person who has all but stopped. The person for whom the gap between the praying and the receiving became so discouraging over time that the praying itself has slowed to almost nothing, not out of rebellion or indifference, but out of a weariness that has made even the reaching feel like too much. I want to say to that person specifically, it is not too late to start again. Not from the beginning, not with a fresh slate that pretends the hard season did not happen, but from exactly here, from exactly this moment, with exactly the faith you currently have, however small it feels, however tired it is, however far from what it once was. Bring me what you have. The smallest, most exhausted, most uncertain version of your faith is still faith, and I will meet it. I will receive it. I will not compare it to what it used to be or hold it up against some standard it needs to reach before I engage with it. I will take what you bring today and I will be faithful with it, because that is who I am. And because you, tired and uncertain and barely reaching as you may be right now, are still someone I love completely and someone I am still listening for. Come back, just come back. I have been waiting. And let me say this one last thing before the prayer, because I think it is the sentence that this entire message has been building toward, and I do not want it to get lost in everything else that has been said. You have never prayed alone, not one single time. Every prayer you have ever prayed, in every season, in every condition, whether it felt powerful or hollow, whether it felt heard or swallowed by silence, you were not alone in it. I was there. I was present. I was listening with my whole self and receiving what you brought with my whole heart. There has not been a single moment in the entire history of your prayer life when you were speaking to an empty room. The room has never been empty. The room has always had me in it, closer than the feeling of silence suggested, more attentive than the lack of immediate response implied, more moved by what you brought than you knew. You have never prayed alone. You never will. And that truth, if you will let it become the foundation of the way you approach prayer from this day forward, will change everything about how you pray and what you expect, and how you carry the seasons when the answers are not yet visible. You are heard. You have always been heard, and I love you too much to ever stop listening. Let us pray together. Lord Jesus, I come to you right now on behalf of every heart that is hearing this message. You know the one who has been carrying unanswered prayers for so long that they have started to wonder if the praying was ever reaching anyone. You know the one who has adjusted their expectations downward because the silence felt like a pattern. You know the one who has almost stopped, who is holding on by the thinnest thread of faith, who needs to hear today more than anything else that they were never talking to an empty room. Meet them here, Lord. Let the truth that every prayer was heard land in them with the weight it deserves. Heal the places that have been wounded by the silence. Restore the confidence to pray without apology, without editing, without keeping the requests small enough to be safe. Let them feel today what it means to be heard by a God who is always listening, always present, always leaning in to receive what they bring. And for the specific prayers they have been carrying the longest, the ones they almost stopped praying, speak directly into those today. Let them know those prayers are alive in your hands, and that you have not forgotten a single one. In Jesus' name, Amen. If this message reached you today, type "You heard me" in the comments, and share this with someone who needs to know that their prayers have never gone unheard. Not one of them, not ever.